Hello and welcome. I hope that you're all doing well. In this video, we're going to take a look at how we can interact with some of the APIs that we constructed in our Node.js server in the previous video through our React code. So let's go over to the code and take a look at what we can do. So I've created this student component, and my main goal is to get the student component to be able to post data to our actual server, which is located here. So I want to send a post request into this app.post in order to be able to provide data to it. So let's take a look at how we might do that. So we're going to start off with the same way that we've created every component. So we'll create a student component, which has each of these components for the function in it. And we're going to have a state set up. And that state is going to be for the student ID and the student name. So basically the student ID and student name are going to be stored and manipulated through HTML. So people will be able to input data for each of those. So we're going to store them as states in our actual application. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll set up a student underscore ID and set student underscore ID. This is going to be set up as a state. And that state is going to be set initialized to nothing. So we're going to initialize it to a blank string because by default, nothing has been provided for that value. And we're going to do the exact same thing for student name. Those are the two components that we're going to pass into our post. So use student name, which is going to be use state as a blank string. Now at this point, I'm actually going to build the HTML first, and then we'll get back to how we can actually post the data to the Node server. So what we're going to do is we're going to return back a fragment. And inside of that fragment is going to be the form that the person interacts with to send data over to the server. So they're basically going to input data into these text boxes in a form. They're going to submit it. The submit is going to send the post request, and that's going to save our data on the server. So for a form, we're going to have an H1 that's going to say, let's say, add a student. We're then going to create a form, and we're going to have an onSubmit for it, which is going to be onSubmit form. This onSubmit form is a function that we're actually going to declare. And let me just declare it now before we forget about it. So we'll say const onSubmit form. And this is going to be an asynchronous function. The reason why this is asynchronous is because when we post data to the server has to store the data inside of a storage container, and that's an asynchronous call, if you may recall from when we talked about this in the previous section, right? When we store things in the storage, it's actually asynchronous. So as a result, the submit also is going to be asynchronous because it has to wait sort of for that asynchronous call to finish. So by default, this should also be asynchronous to accommodate for that. So that's why this is an async function. So that's where we're going to write the code for the post, but we'll finish off the form first. I just wanted to add it in as we're adding it in as a reference here. We're going to have a label, which is simply just text that will follow the text box to say what it actually is. So the first text box is going to be student ID. And that's going to be done as an input of type equal to text. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a value for that, which is going to be equal to student underscore ID. That's the state value here. And when this changes, so when we change this, this text box, it's going to do an event, which is going to set the student ID. So it's going to set the student ID to e.target.value. So what this is going to do is it's going to set the student ID to whatever value is inputted in this input box. That's really what this code is doing right now. So that's going to be the setup for our input. We'll go ahead and close off that. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it for our student name because it's going to follow a very similar pattern, right? So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go below the form here. We'll copy that over. We'll change student ID here to student name. This should be student underscore name. And then this should be set student underscore name. And that's all of the components that are required for this. Now, the last thing that we're going to need is a submit button. And the way that we do that is we just say input type equals submit, value equals submit. So what this does is when they click this button, it triggers the submission of this form, which will then run on submit form. That will take us up to this function here. And what we're going to do inside of this function is a few different things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the code e.prevent_default. What this is going to do is it's going to stop the page from initially refreshing, like immediately once the request is sent. The reason why I'm doing this is because when you think about the way that forms usually work, you click on the submit button, it loads to submit the data to the backend, and then the page refreshes. So that's the way that we're going to follow for this process is we're going to send the request, wait for it to finish, and then we're going to refresh the page. So to stop it from refreshing immediately, I do prevent default. I'm then going to do a try catch. So in the catch, I'm simply just going to log the error that happens. So we'll do error.message. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually send the request. So the way that we do that is we set up a body that has the student ID and student name inside of it. So this is just containing all of the data that we want to send. And then we're going to do an await fetch. And we're going to send it to HTTP localhost 5000/student. So this is going to send a request to this location, this 5000/student. The method that we're going to use for this is post, because we're trying to send a post request to this endpoint. The header is going to tell us what kind of data we're sending. So the kind of data that we're sending is content type, application/JSON, since we're sending JSON data over. And then the body is going to contain JSON.stringify body. So what this is doing is it's sending a post request to this URL here. It's setting the header as application JSON because this is JSON data. Sorry, there shouldn't be a semicolon here. And what this body is doing is it's taking these declarations that we have here, and it's formatting them in JSON format. That way they're actually able to be parsed as JSON rather than just as text. And that's really all there is to sending the request. So this is how we send a request through React. We simply send a fetch that's going to use the method that we would like. So in this case, post, and then we send the data with the post, and that actually, sends the data over to the server for the server to process. The last thing I'm going to do is just refresh the page once this is done. And to do that, we could do window.location =/. What this does is it loads the location localhost and then just / like this. That's sort of the root location, which is the default location for this application to be in. So now that we have all of this written, we can go ahead and give it a test. So our node.js server is already running here. So you want to make sure that that's running. And then in a different command prompt window, you're going to start your React app. This is just going to load for a minute. And then what's going to happen is it's going to load up our page. And it looks like I just forgot one little thing here. Just at the bottom of our student component, I remember that we have to export default student, right? So that has to be done as well. Just to note, in the app.js, of course, you import the student like this. I just realized that I didn't show that part as well. So you import the student and then just put the student tags in like this. Once that's done, this is what your main page should look like. And what we could do is we can send over a student ID and a student name. And you can see it refreshes once it's done sending. And what should happen is when we come back over here, we should see that there has been some post requests that have come through. You see that this one has the value A and A. That's the one that we just sent over to the server. So you now have a better picture of how we can actually interact between Node.js and React. This helps you understand the practical ideas of how we can build sort of a fully functional app with a React frontend and a Node backend. So thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.